Here's a photo of one of the deadliest wild animals on Earth. Known as Morbid, the rogue bull elephant has been linked to at least 25 human deaths in Nepal since 2010. In 2012, he trampled a husband and wife to death near Chitwan National Park, forcing his devastated son to move nearly 9 miles away across 2 rivers in hope that they'd never cross paths with him again. But 14 years later, Morbid found them, raiding their home and killing the man's 25-year-old daughter-in-law and 4-year-old grandson, bringing the same family's death toll up to 4. The attacks have unfolded amid a growing human-elephant conflict, as shrinking habitat and growing villages have pushed elephants into closer contact with people. Despite being shot, fitted with multiple tracking collars, and closely monitored for years, Morbid remains alive, and the surviving father now says, "There's nowhere left for us to run." Here's some terrifying footage from one of the most horrific flood disasters imaginable. After catastrophic flooding struck southern China in July of 2026, a snake breeding farm was destroyed, releasing about 900 snakes, including venomous cobras and kraits, into nearby villages. As residents waded through chest-deep floodwater, authorities warned that deadly snakes could be hiding just beneath the surface. Hospitals rushed to stock with antivenom, emergency teams were deployed to hunt the escaped reptiles, and several people were reportedly bitten while clearing flood debris. The flooding itself killed at least 39 people and forced 130,000 residents to evacuate. That is horrible. What the f? This was the final footage of Chiara Giaconis just moments before she'd be tragically killed. In 2024 in Naples, Italy, 30-year-old Prada manager Chiara Giaconis was on what was supposed to be a dream birthday trip with her boyfriend when she was walking through a narrow street in the historic center. As they passed beneath an apartment balcony, a decorative stone statuette was suddenly thrown from above, striking her in the head with enough force to cause catastrophic injuries. She would end up tragically dying from the impact. Investigators determined the object had been thrown by a 13-year-old boy inside the apartment, who had reportedly been tossing several items from the balcony beforehand. But because he was under 14, he could not be criminally charged under Italian law, even though his actions led directly to her death. Prosecutors instead charged the boy's parents with manslaughter, arguing that the death was completely preventable and that they failed to properly supervise him. Parents have denied any wrongdoing, maintaining they couldn't have possibly anticipated what happened. As the case continues, the focus remains on whether their level of supervision meets the threshold for criminal responsibility in a situation where a single impulsive act turned fatal within seconds. Country singer Mindy McCready shot to fame after her 1996 debut album 10,000 Angels sold over 2 million copies, but then her life quickly spiraled into years of addiction, abusive relationships, legal troubles, and mental health crisis. In January of 2013, her longtime boyfriend died by a home they shared, leaving her completely devastated. Just 2 weeks later, she lost custody of her 2 young sons. Just days later, after killing the family's dog, McCready died by suicide, 37 years old, ending one of country music's most tragic and heartbreaking stories. Lisa Reed had been completely blind for 13 years after a childhood tumor damaged her optic nerve, relying on a guide dog to navigate everyday life. But one night in November of 2000, she accidentally banged her head on a coffee table while trying to bend down to kiss her guide dog goodnight, then woke up the next morning able to see again. Doctors confirmed she'd regained about 80% of her vision in one eye but could offer no medical explanation, calling it a miracle unlike anything they'd ever seen. One of the most emotional moments came when she saw her younger brother for the first time since he was a child, telling him in amazement, "My brother's a man," before later sharing her extraordinary story in her memoir, Angel Eyes. Serial killer Richard Ramirez spent nearly 24 years on California's death row before dying in 2013 from complications of B-cell lymphoma at age 53, never having been executed. In the weeks before his death, advanced liver failure reportedly turned his skin a vivid green, with several prison sources claiming he looked like a green highlighter pen. Despite being sentenced to death in 1989 for 13 murders and various other violent crimes, he died of natural causes while still awaiting execution. This box contains hundreds of knee replacements that outlived the people they were implanted in. During cremation, the human body is reduced to ashes, but artificial joints survive the furnace intact. They're removed afterward, collected like this, and often recycled into new products, with many crematories donating the proceeds to charitable causes. Poker champion Victoria Corin Mitchell once sought therapy to overcome her fear of flying, but in a cruel twist of fate, her therapist was later killed in a plane crash. The tragedy reinforced her long-standing phobia rather than curing it, and she's avoided flying ever since, often traveling by train or boat instead. This was the moment a birthday party Spider-Man nearly died within seconds. He dives into the pool in full costume, but when he comes up, the mask is completely soaked and suctioned to his face. He quickly starts panicking and trying to breathe, while the kids think it's part of the act and continue splashing him. He gets out pretty quickly, but continues struggling to breathe since he can't free his face. He essentially waterboarded himself since the mask had trapped the water, making it impossible to breathe. Luckily, a few adults recognized what was happening and helped him pull the mask off before he suffocated. Here's a creepy clip of a dog making biting motions at its owner whenever she turns her back. Each time she turns away, the dog stiffens, locks onto her, and snaps at the air. According to vets online, this isn't playful behavior, but hesitation mixed with fear or low-level aggression. Dogs are more likely to test boundaries if they don't feel watched, especially if they're anxious or unsure. It's essentially a dog working up to a bite without fully committing, and trainers say behavior like this can escalate if it isn't addressed early on. This was the terrifying moment a driver realized he was about to be carjacked. He turns down a narrow street at night and is immediately met by a group of men waving weapons that look like machetes. But instead of backing out, he moves forward, only to realize the road has been deliberately blocked. Two large tanker trucks are positioned on the street, and a fallen tree is laid out between them, leaving almost no way through. Within seconds, the men rush the car and start smashing the windows, trying to force their way inside. The driver panics but stays moving, squeezing the car through a tight gap along the side of the road, barely clearing the obstacles as the attackers were closing in. He manages to break past them and speed off before they can get the doors open. Incidents like this are a known tactic across parts of the world where organized roadside robberies happen frequently, with criminals blocking roads to trap drivers before surrounding the vehicle. It's not clear where this particular clip took place, but the setup matches methods that have been commonly reported across the globe. This was the moment an MMA fighter was forced to face off against an aggressive dog. When a large unleashed pit bull suddenly charges straight at him, he reacts quickly, putting the dog in a headlock while keeping its jaws away from his face and neck. He stays calm the entire time, controlling the dog's movement on the ground like he's in a match. Luckily, the dog had a weak ground game. A few seconds later, the owner finally shows up and manages to control his massive dog. The guy walks away completely unscathed, and it's pretty clear his wrestling background is the only reason this didn't end much worse. In 2024 in Minnesota, an 18-year-old driver reported that his Honda Pilot began accelerating on its own and wouldn't slow down, even when he used the brakes and emergency brake. The SUV reached speeds over 110 miles per hour and continued for over 20 minutes, crossing into North Dakota while the driver remained on the phone with 911. As he was approaching a dead end, authorities coordinated a controlled intervention, using police vehicles to safely bring the SUV to a stop without a high-speed crash. Miraculously, the driver was not seriously injured, and the incident ended without any fatalities, though the cause of the malfunction has never been determined. In June of 2023, in the North Atlantic Ocean near the Titanic wreck site, Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Sulman were among those killed when the Titan submersible suddenly imploded. Nearly 9 months later, after recovery efforts at extreme depths, small amounts of human remains were returned to the family. Identified through DNA testing, the material was described by Shahzada's wife as the slush that was left delivered in 2 small shoe boxes. Due to the conditions of the implosion in the environment, the remains were limited and heavily fragmented, with some of the recovered material being mixed together, meaning it could not be definitively attributed to one specific individual. In Rochester, New York in 2022, a woman installed a hidden trail cam at her mother's grave after noticing it kept being disturbed. The footage soon captured her father, the woman's ex-husband, returning to the cemetery and urinating directly on the grave multiple times per week. The behavior had been going on for at least several months, and likely closer to a year or more before it was caught on camera. In multiple clips, his partner could be seen waiting nearby in a car while he carried out the act. Police were contacted, but the case fell into a gray area legally, with any charges depending on local cemetery regulation. The situation drew attention for the sustained, deliberate nature of the acts, targeting the grave long after the relationship had ended.